Just a bit of an updates video here. Last time I took a bit of downtime due to being sick, I didn't actually post any notification about it, and I did post a comment on the most recent video that I'd uploaded explaining it, but in the next video I got a ton of comments wondering where I was, so I guess not a lot of people check back on videos they've already watched for those comments. So I felt like this time I should put an update video up. Don't worry, I'm not sick or anything, but I'm going to be going away just to see relatives for maybe about a week or so. However, I have recorded quite far ahead in preparation for this. I have about 3 chapters worth of footage still to upload that includes both my castle sessions and actual battles. And the next one is quite long, so there is definitely a good lot of footage that I can put out while I'm away. I'll hopefully have internet while I'm over there. If I don't, well, yeah, if I miraculously disappear from comment sections for a while, it's because I didn't have internet down there. But that's probably just a worst case scenario. Basically, I've recorded chapters 23, 24 in their entirety, and let's just say for chapter 25, I have enough footage for a full episode, but I have not beaten that chapter yet. So that should tell you something. Basically, history seems to have kind of repeated itself with chapter 25, as it, apart from Birthright, tends to give me trouble on pretty much every route. It's also kind of ironic, if you know who the boss of chapter 25 on Revelation is, yeah. I will confess my first attempt of that chapter was a complete disaster. I was really not prepared for how enormous of a difficulty spike that chapter is. Basically, the enemies in 24 are pretty pathetically easy, and I was able to get through it with basically no troubles. 25, on the other hand, is almost Conquest level in terms of difficulty, the only difference being the enemies don't have skills. I will say, having some time to calm down and just think about the chapter, I think I have a plan, and I don't think it's going to be as bad as Realma's chapter. But yeah, I was really not prepared for that difficulty spike, so don't worry, I don't get as angry as I did in Conquest 25, but I was a little bit jaded in my commentary throughout most of that, so just be warned about that. I guess one more thing in regards to Revelations updates. I think Shiro's paralogue is going to be the last paralogue that I do on camera. I might show brief bits of Soleil's just capturing the boss, because he was the one boss that I missed on the other routes. But apart from that, I really feel like it's in my best interest to not show any more paralogs at this point, because Hidden Truths is going to be part of the Revelations playlist, and Heirs of Fate will be as well, which will be done after I beat the final chapter. Hidden Truths will be done just before chapter 27, and I know people have said that it'll spoil Anunkos's appearance, but I still think that is worth actually getting backstory on him. From what I've heard, if you just do the Revelation endgame and don't do Hidden Truths, Anunkos is a generic villain with no backstory whatsoever, and I really, really don't want that for what's supposed to be the big finale of the game. There are a few more DLCs that I plan on doing, but they won't be part of the Revelation playlist. They'll actually be put onto the playlist that I do those DLCs with, because yes, I'm going to be bringing back my Birthright and Conquest parties for a few of them, as well as the Amiibo team battles, so look forward to those. That's basically it for updates on Revelation so far, but I thought I'd actually take a little bit of time to, while I'm on a bit of a updates kind of like video log thing, to talk about a few games that I've been playing recently. And maybe my thoughts on a few of the new Pokemon developments, because people have asked me for them. First up, I've been playing a lot of a game called The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel, which is available on PlayStation 3 and also PS Vita, I think. It's basically the third arc of an ongoing series, but I could actually jump into it pretty much fine. If anything, not playing earlier games actually keeps a lot of the plot twists mysterious, because some of them are actually apparently foregone conclusions if you've played earlier things. The interesting thing about the game is that it apparently takes place at the same time as some of the other games in the series, just in a different country. However, the game that it takes place simultaneously with is actually one that never got localized, which is unfortunate. Though, there is the possibility of it being localized eventually. They are bringing over the first arc to Steam, and I really think that once I finish playing this game, I'm going to go ahead and buy Trails in the Sky and Trails in the Sky Second Chapter and play those on Steam, because I am really, really liking this series, if this game is any indication. It's a JRPG, basically, with a battle system that I feel is kind of like a fusion of traditional turn-based RPG combat and a turn-based strategy game. Because you have like a Final Fantasy X style turn order, and yes, you can manipulate that with different moves and things like that, but you can also move your characters around on the field, and while combat is still strictly turn-based, you have AoE attacks, and positioning is very important. In some ways, it actually reminds me quite a bit of Lost Dimension. The gameplay is pretty great overall. I've been playing on, well, I jumped right into hard mode, and a couple of bosses have pretty much destroyed me for it, but when you retry with the right strategy, it's rarely too bad. The real draw of the game, though, to me so far has been the story and characters. I guess with Fire Emblem Fate's story being a little disappointing, I've kind of turned to this for a really engaging RPG storyline, and it's really, really delivered. The awesome thing is, the game it's been one of the few games that has constantly kept me guessing as to who the actual big bad is the whole game. I'm at the point where I feel like I have a very good idea of who they are, but it's someone I never would have expected at first. There are tons of really interesting NPCs, and all of them are very well developed, and it's really interesting trying to figure out just what side they're on and what role they're playing in the story. Pretty much every major NPC has some kind of big secret to them, which I really, really like. It's about a country that has a strict class system, and there's basically a lot of friction between two factions, one that supports revolutionizing the system, and the noble houses who want to keep the old system in place. And that's basically all I'll say for now, because I really don't want to spoil some of the things that end up happening. The main characters, though, are members of a military academy that doesn't do all that much military stuff until later in the game. But even then, there is a very definite Valkyria Chronicles feel to the setting and some of the characters, which, since I really like Valkyria Chronicles, that was good for me. All the characters in the main party are very well developed, they all have a very unique battle role, and none of them feel useless or anything like that. They also mostly avoid falling into cliches, and the ones that do feel like cliches at first, develop out of them pretty quickly. It's kind of a testament that out of all the characters in the game, there's really only one who's particularly divisive with the fanbase, and I can really see why, but I find that he does get better later on. There is kinda like a social sim system where you can bond with each of your party members. The unfortunate thing, though, is you cannot possibly see every bond conversation in a single playthrough. In fact, it seems like if you want to get every single Bond conversation for one specific character, you have to dedicate almost the entire game to it. So seeing everything does require multiple New Game Pluses, which I guess can be kind of an issue. The other annoying thing is you have Bond conversations with characters who aren't even in your party as well, and I find myself, because Bonds actually give benefits in battle like they do in most RPGs, I find it really hard to actually find myself doing those conversations. Even though a few of them do join your party as guests later, I find the benefits of increasing their bonds aren't all that helpful compared to the regular cast. So yeah, there's that. Oh, also, this is one of the few RPGs I've felt that gives you a pretty massive cast of characters that all join you pretty much right from the start, without ever feeling overwhelming. Basically, Okay, I will also say, and this might be a turn off to some people, the game is extremely linear. You're basically plot railroaded throughout the entire thing. You have some freedom to explore the academy and the town on free days, that's when you can bond with people, but outside of that, you are pretty much strictly locked into following the plotted line, as TV tropes would go, from the beginning to the very end. Basically, you have a few days of academy life, a practical exam that's kind of like a mini-boss fight. Then you get sent on a field study to a particular location within the Empire, and all the locations are pretty awesome, and you get some great development and backstory in each place. Oh yeah, another great strength of this game. The world building is actually really, really good. There are even a few in-universe novels that you can actually find chapters of and read. I haven't got around to reading most of them, but apparently they reveal some interesting developments since they, let's just say, may or may not have been inspired by true events in story. But anyway, you go on your field study, you do side quests there and other kinds of things, and eventually it all ends with you inevitably getting involved in some kind of incident and a big boss fight that gets its own dramatic boss subtitles. And then the process repeats for the next chapter. So if you want like an RPG where you can really just go wherever you want and do everything at your own pace, play Xenoblade Chronicles X. This is not that kind of game, but if you want a really tightly woven story with really, really good characters, I would really, really highly recommend this one. Just a warning though, I haven't got to the end of the game just yet, but I have read the game ends on an enormous cliffhanger. A cliffhanger so enormous that a lot of people have actually got quite angry because it makes a lot of things you do through the game feel a bit pointless. However, this is not as bad as it is for some other games that infamously ended this way, because a sequel is being worked on, and in fact is going to be released very soon, like September, I think, in America, or even like later this year, basically. But it's going to be released very soon, so in a way, now is probably the best time to play it, because the cliffhanger won't be as frustrating. So anyway, that's just my thoughts on one of these games that I'm playing and recommendations. And now on to another game that I'm pretty sure a lot of people will be wanting to know a bit about. I'm now in a position to talk about it a little bit, so let's get to it. Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE is the other game that I've been playing at the moment. I haven't got, I guess, all that far in the game. I've recently just beat Chapter 4, and I do know there are 6 total chapters in the game, so I'm approaching kind of the last third. I have already seen streams of the final boss, though, and quite a lot of bits of the next few chapters. So, by the way, for those of you expecting a blind playthrough of this, yeah, that was out the window from the beginning because I had pretty avidly watched streams. I was actually very interested in this game right from the start, mainly because I was kind of one of the few people who didn't like the idea of a direct crossover, because nothing against people who do like these games, but I'm not a particularly big fan of mainline Shin Megami Tensei. I still agree they're very good games, it's just that, yeah, they're personally not my thing. But anyway, I'll basically just say this game ended up being pretty much exactly what I thought it would be. Basically, completely ignore the fact that it's a crossover. It's pretty much a crossover in name only, and I guess that's why it didn't really sell so well. However, it does not deserve anywhere near the amount of hate that it gets, because beneath that is a very good core RPG. The core gameplay mechanics, I felt, are actually one of the nicest in an RPG I've actually found. And it's kind of weird, even though you don't get all that many locations to explore, I've still found exploring them to be quite fun. I'll just say though, do not expect much of the story. The story is almost a gigantic excuse plot. There's really nothing much special about it. It's basically just your average high school student save the world with the power of friendship, yay. With some idle stuff thrown in that, is okay, but could have been gone into a little bit better. I'll get to that later. I will also say, though, from what I've read, and this mostly goes by TV Tropes, and from the looks of things, TV Tropes' page on this game was clearly written by people who hate it, which I find is kind of unfair. But from what it seems like, the TV Tropes page would make you believe that the entire fandom thinks the entire cast are intolerable, screechy pieces of crap. Not true at all. While some of the characters may be cliches, like, I feel like Torma is pretty much generic and not all that, not important, but not all that unique. The cast is better than a lot of people give them credit for. The main standout is Kyria. Kyria actually has a surprising bit of development, having kind of in some ways an inverted situation of what you normally find embarrassing about a personality. I found her storyline to be quite interesting overall. It also helps that she is billed as like a #1 pop star in the game's universe. Her songs are actually genuinely reflective of that. Most people have heard the Reincarnation song, which is awesome, but she has a few more if you go through her side quests, which are also pretty awesome. One of her special moves is still one of the few that I almost never skip the animation for, because the song she does for it is just that good. Mamori is also kind of interesting. In some ways, she's a generic kid teammate character, but she does have some development, and in battle, she is insanely useful. Her and Effie have definitely broken the stigma of female armor knights in the series by a long shot, let's just say. Though I admit, her randomly covering allies ability, that can either be really good or really, really bad. There are cases where she'll do it for attacks that the ally would have survived anyway, and in fact, you would have wanted them to get hit by anyway. So, yeah, like, an attack's going for someone who resists that element, and she jumps in and she's weak to it, and you're like, why did you do that, Mamori? Eleonora, or Ellie, in some ways is kind of a stereotypical tsundere actress type, but she does get a bit of development in side quests, and some things of the way that the game deals with her half-Western heritage is, it's a kind of thing that a lot of Japanese games have a half-Western character and just nothing much is really done with it, it's just sort of there. But with her, it's actually a part of her character, which I find quite interesting. Not a really, really massive part, but it does play into some things. One thing about her, though, that I do find annoying, would you just shut up about Hollywood already? You say that in almost all of your battle quotes, and it gets really annoying after a while. Speaking of which, the game is entirely in Japanese, and most of it is subtitled very well, but I find it really annoying they never bothered to subtitle the battle dialogue, because just like Persona Q, the characters have unique dialogue for so many different situations in battle. Like, when they're wearing certain costumes, their dialogue will change. When they're affected by certain statuses, they'll comment on it. When fighting certain enemy types, they'll comment. They have unique comments on particular bosses that they have personal connections to. It's kind of a shame they never bothered to translate any of that. When I do get around to doing a playthrough of this, I'll try to be subtitling as much of the battle dialogue as I can, which is gonna be kind of difficult, but I'll try. Oh, by the way, Tsubasa's dialogue, if she gets put to sleep, is very, let's just say, suspect. She mumbles stuff about Itsuki that, yeah. Speaking of which, Tsubasa. Now, I've heard that Tsubasa gets a lot of hate, mostly from people who hate the game, but I actually felt that she was much more... The thing is, her actual character is fairly generic, and even her development in side quests isn't that great. The thing is, though, she is a very good comedy character. She has a lot of great humor moments throughout the game, especially early on with her insane fangirling over Kyria once she joins the team. Even her animations and facial expressions and stuff. Also, wait a minute, there is one of her side quests, I think it's her second side quest, the one about let's just say the one involving Little Devil, that is pretty hilarious. But yeah, so in a lot of ways, she almost reminds me of an Ace Attorney character in how quirky she is and how that's used for comedy a lot. Weird thing is, though, I've actually found her to be not that useful in battle, surprisingly. Mostly because the game is very fast-paced, and generally any enemy that is even vaguely a threat to you will kill you so fast that dedicated healers aren't really useful. And out of her two main attack specialties, Torma does lance attacks better, and Kyria does magic better. One thing I will say about the characters, though, when I get around to actually doing the game, I plan to do like a full walkthrough style research series, which is why I'm waiting until there's more information out about it. But I plan on doing character bios like I did for Awakening and for Persona 3. The thing about that is, the characters are so customizable with the skill system, it's actually kind of hard to explain what they're good at, because really, you can make them good at whatever you want them to be. Thinking instead, I'll just give like a vague outline of the kind of abilities they usually lean towards, and just basically let players decide for themselves what to actually do, because I don't want to spoil the kinds of skills they learn off of weapons, and off of Radiant Unity, because some of the Radiant Unity skills are actually really interesting, and I'd like to keep them a surprise. I will say though, get open audition on everyone as soon as you possibly can. It makes the game so much easier. Speaking of which, I've heard some weird reports about the game's overall difficulty, so I guess I'll explain my findings so far. I've been playing on hard, and what I've found about the game's difficulty is a little weird. I've never had any trouble with basic enemies other than the savage encounters, which are basically FOEs if you're familiar with Persona Q. But yeah, you're not really supposed to fight those. Well, I've actually beaten one that was about 10 levels higher than me through judicious use of buffs and things like that, and some attack mirror items. So it is doable, but yeah, they're meant to be really difficult. Also, oddly enough, the actual end of chapter bosses, I've beaten every one of them on my first try. Even chapter 4's boss, which when I looked at streams, I thought would be an absolute nightmare. Maybe because I already knew what to expect from that boss, I did a better job. If you don't see the final phase of that fight coming, it can really destroy you, so yeah, make sure to keep buffs active for that one. But other than that, the actual end of chapter bosses have actually felt fairly reasonable to me for the most part. The weird thing is, the one part of the game that on hard mode has given me any trouble is the mini-bosses. Aside from the very first mini-boss, well not the very first one, the one in Shibuya 106, I have died to every single mini-boss at least once. This might just be because I never saw any of the mini-bosses in live streams, so I never knew what to expect from them. All the mini-bosses have very specific tactics they use, and if you're not prepared to counter those tactics, you are gonna get killed very quickly. They're usually not too bad though once you actually know how to counter them, and a lot of them are actually quite fun once you do. But yeah, it's very weird of me to find an RPG where the hardest part has been the mini-bosses, but that's what it's been like to me so far. Also a few of the side quest bosses. The side quest bosses are kinda tough, but they're sort of designed to be. I've said in one of my recent videos that I fought Lorenz recently, and he's kind of annoying. He has a super powerful attack that always triggers sessions regardless of weaknesses, and yeah, it's also the only attack he uses, but it tends to wreck you pretty fast. That's basically a theme of this game. I feel like if you know the TV trope rocket tag gameplay, it's basically, the gameplay is very fast-paced and very hyper-offensive. Weaknesses and session attacks get through enemies very quickly, but the same can be said of you. Now, enemy session attacks don't happen that often outside of mini-boss fights where they're actually specifically designed to take advantage of that, so don't worry too much. But like I said before, anything that tends to kill you kills you very quickly. Thankfully, and yeah, you can tell it's really saying something when you can buy full HP recovery items and like 70% HP revival items from the shop right from the start of the game. There's a very good reason for that. No, those don't break the game at all. They're completely necessary. You will take a lot of damage and pretty quickly, but once you get to return the favor, the enemies will suffer the same. It's not nearly as insane as Shin Megami Tensei 4, where there was no defense stat whatsoever, and battles basically boiled down to whoever got the first strike. But it is very offensive and very fast-paced. It is very fun, though, and I still think it's one of the better battle systems that I've seen in an RPG. The real draw of the game to me, though, is the skill system. The skill system is amazing, and I really wish that it worked that way in Persona. Basically, you learn new skills off of your weapons. Every weapon has a certain number of skills that it'll give you. I guess in some ways it feels like some of the SMT games that have the Demon Whisper ability, where you learn new skills off of your demons. It's similar to that. But it comes with an added twist. If you learn a skill that you already have, that skill turns into a powered-up version. So, it often becomes a debate of, do I stick with powering up, let's say, Zionga, or do I upgrade to Zeodyne? There's also a lot of passive skills you can learn off of these weapons too, and finding the right combination of passive skills for each character is a really interesting exercise in planning, and there's a lot of customization potential here. Like, the main character, for one, is pretty much a jack of all trades. You can really make him either an offensive sword user, an offensive thunder mage, a partial healer, or a combination of all of them. You can even make him a buffer or debuffer. For Kyria, you can choose kind of whether to focus just on her main elements of Dark and Ice, and then put all these buffing skills on her, like Concentrate, the game's version of Mind Charge, or you can spread things around and make her specialize in every offensive element. The one thing about skills that I will say is maybe a bit of a downside is the session skills. It's often impossible to plan ahead for who should have what session skill, as to which attacks will work best linked into which other attacks. It's mostly just whichever ones you get first. And sometimes you'll inevitably run into situations where you'll have a session that gets halted because one of your characters is nulled or absorbed by the enemy. Then there are the Radiant skills. These are basically just passive abilities the characters learn as their stage rank increases. A lot of them are kind of cool, and quite unique to each character. You also get one of these out of every single character quest as well. And I always love RPGs that actually give characters access to new moves based on their side quest progression. You get a lot of really interesting super moves from these too, some of which have some very useful party-wide buff effects. You also get ad-lib skills, which are upgraded versions of basic attacks that can randomly activate when you use one of them. They're not all that reliable. When they do go off, they tend to do really well. I should also say though, if you give up on learning a skill from a weapon and you later think, oh wait, I think I need that now, later in the game, you do unlock the ability to reforge weapons so that you can relearn all the skills attached to them. This is also a great way to power up your existing skills. Once you get that, I wasn't actually expecting that, and once I got it, I was thinking, wait a minute, there's even more customization potential in this game? I was really floored by that, actually. There's quite a lot of possibilities, and it's actually really deep overall. In a lot of ways, I like this system better than the Persona fusing system in the Persona games. I guess one final note I can talk about is the character side quests. I've alluded to these before. These are a little hit and miss overall. There are some really, really great ones. Character development-wise, Kiria's second quest would be an example, and Mamori's first quest as well. That ends with a surprisingly tough boss fight as well. I like that. And there are also some pretty hilarious ones, like Tsubasa's second character quest, but there are some that fall really flat, like, to me, Tiki's second quest. There was barely any gameplay at all, and most of it was revolved around humor that kind of fell flat. There are a lot like this too, so they are very hit and miss, but it's well worth your while doing them because you always get new abilities out of them. And that's basically all I'll say about this game. It's definitely a very good RPG with a really great core battle system. Don't expect a stellar story by any means at all, and don't expect to particularly involve crossover. I feel like this game would have done much better as a standalone game and not as a crossover, but it is still, at its core, a good game, and I don't think it deserves any of the hate that it gets. Anyway, now I'll just give a few thoughts on a few Pokemon announcements, and I've got a picture for the occasion. This is an actual sign from the fire station near where I live. Yes, really. Oh, that is what the emergency number in Australia is, by the way. Thing is, though, I actually haven't got Pokemon Go yet, and I'm not sure I really intend to at any point. To me, really, the very dumbed-down battle system doesn't appeal to me all that much. I'd much rather stick with the actual games. I do like that the series is finally getting a lot of attention again, and I hope that this will bring in a lot more people for Sun and Moon, but those are the games that I'm really looking forward to. So, recent Sun and Moon stuff that I want to give my thoughts on. New forms of old Pokemon. This is a really brilliant idea, and something that I feel really should have been done in Gen 6. One of the biggest things that made me dislike X and Y a lot is the really heavy focus on old Pokemon over new. Only 15% of the Kalos Pokedex was new Pokemon, and they were all just really well hidden. That just annoyed me so much. For a new generation, nothing about it felt new in the slightest. I can appreciate all of the innovations and updates they made to competitive battling. That was great. But overall, X and Y as core games are my second least favorite in the series, just for all of those reasons. But if they had done something like this, if they had actually given the old Pokemon Kalos forms, I might have let that slide. So I really like they're actually giving new leases of life to old Pokemon. The other weird thing is, I've voiced my views on Gen 1ers many times before, but the thing is, I don't mind all of the Alolan forms being Generation 1 Pokemon so far. The main reason is, it's kind of like an if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. A lot of the Gen 1 Pokemon, as far as type combinations and most likely stats, because the description for Sandshrew heavily implies the Alolan form has different stats than the normal one. But yeah, most of the Gen 1 Pokemon have not really aged well from a gameplay standpoint, so a lot of them really need an update. A lot of the newer Pokemon, on the other hand, they'd benefit from a new form less so because a lot of the black and white Pokemon, for example, they all have really good stats. So some of them would not really need modification all that much. The Gen 1 Pokemon's stats were good for the time, but even the decent ones, just the type combinations, abilities, and stats just aren't that great by modern standards, so it's great to see them get an update. I would like to see maybe some Alolan form Johto Pokemon, because I still feel like overall, from a pure statistics standpoint, and that's really the only thing that matters to me when it comes to Pokemon, the Johto Pokemon, I feel, outside of a few rare standouts, are by far the worst batch of new Pokemon in the series, so a lot of them could really use the boost. As for other things, I've noticed that a lot of the new Pokemon this time have abilities that are directly tied to them in some way. That, like, change their stats when they get to a certain HP threshold, and even change their battle model too. From the looks of things, this is going to mean a lot more abilities will be added to the list of things that Trace can't copy. Some of them have alright potential though I'm a bit worried about Minior because Zenmo Darmanitan never did particularly well. Having a radical stat change to a Pokemon when its HP drops below half, with 4 move slots, it's almost impossible to actually make a moveset that works with that, so that's a problem. There's also that new fish Pokemon, Wishy-Washy. Its ability feels a bit strange to me. It says at a certain level it turns into its school form, but from the Japanese trailer, when its health goes into critical, it goes out of school form. What it looks like is, it's basically an evolution, but one that can potentially be taken away. Which, in some ways, feels like it'd be outclassed by an actual evolution. Maybe it's kind of like Defeatist on Archeops, and as much as people just really don't like that ability, I've made Archeops work in the past, so I reckon people can make this work. The weird sea cucumber thing, though, is kind of funny as far as its ability goes, because it deals damage when it faints equal to the amount of HP it had when it did. I can foresee some kind of funny strategies using Pyukumuku simply as a complete kamikaze Pokemon, just throwing it at a powerful attacker, letting it get one-shotted, and taking its attacker down with it. So I can see people intentionally putting minus defense natures and 0 IVs into it, and just pumping it with as much HP EVs as possible to allow for maximum damage. There's also the Sandcastle Pokemon. Now, I never actually found Golurk's typing to be all that great. It has a lot of common weaknesses. But I don't know why. I just actually think that it's pretty cool. I really like the idea of a possessed Sandcastle, and it's one of those concepts that you think, when you first hear of it, you think, what? That actually exists? And when you think out about it a bit more, you're like, okay, actually that's kind of cool. That's pretty much enough about certain Pokemon now. Now I just want to talk about that thing about the complete revamp of the Gym Leader formula, which, in all honesty, I am really all for. Like I said, X and Y to me just didn't feel new enough to justify being a new generation. And Black and White were my favourites in the series for really playing with the series formula, and seeing new games that do that has really got me interested. The only thing I'm worried about is if there'll be less main story fights. So what I'm hoping is, a lot of people are saying that only the Kahunas are going to be battleable per island. I actually think you're going to have to fight, because they wouldn't mention that the Fire Trial Captain had a Marowak if you didn't have to battle him. And Sophocles' dialogue in the trailer heavily implies he's going to battle you. So, from what it seems like, there's still going to be 8 main fights, 4 island trial captains and 4 island kahunas. Unless the kahunas function as an Elite Four, which I'm kind of hoping isn't the case. But if it does come to us getting less fights as far as gyms go, I'm hoping that you get more evil team fights to make up for it. So far, Team Skull is kind of cool. In a lot of ways, I can't really take them seriously, but that's kind of the point. And their music in the English trailer is actually pretty, simultaneously hilarious and awesome. Though they remind me a ton of Beat from The World Ends With You. I believe he was even nicknamed Skull at one point. Also, they have no relation to Team Skull from Mystery Dungeon, which in the Japanese version were named Team Poison Rose. So yeah, another misconception there. I like, though, that they made the main head of the villainous team obvious this time. I'm sorry, but they did not fool anyone for a moment with Lysandra, and yeah, I'm really glad they're sticking back to making it obvious now. But anyway, I'm hoping he turns out to be an interesting character. I was never a particularly big fan of the Team Flare plot, mostly because it came right on the heels of Team Plasma, which I really liked. So, let's just... yeah, I really can't say much about Team Skull, but hopefully they'll be interesting. I can see some grunts using drowsies and haunters in the trailer, so yes, they have a little bit of variety to them, which is cool. Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about in this video, so I hope you've enjoyed listening to my random thoughts on a few things, and yeah, one other thing. So, as far as updates are concerned, people are really saying that I should have some kind of Twitter or Tumblr or something like that. I've never really liked Twitter, so I probably won't be getting it, but I do have a Tumblr thing that I made just for the purpose of replying to other Tumblrs I follow. But I could repurpose that into some kind of an updates thing, just to keep people updated on any things relating to videos. So that's something to think about, that I might get around to in the future when I have time. But other than that, so yeah, I'll see you in the next video. There will be a few more over the next few days, but if there's a little gap after that, don't worry. I'll be back soon enough.